Hey guys, what's going on? It's Vic Barry. Today's video, brand new lens. Is this going to be your next lens? Because it's very, very cheap. And is it very, very good? We're about to find out. But either way, this is the Viltrox 24mm. It's a full frame lens. Now, does that mean you can't use it on something like the Sony A6600 or the Sony ZV-E10? Well, we'll find out in a bit. But this currently, right now, is on the Sony FX3. So I'm going to go through lots of things in this. We're going to look at the problems that it's going to be a biggie for some of you guys out there, and also the strengths. And one of the strengths is the price. This thing is incredibly cheap. But before we get into all of that, let's give you a look at some of the video quality on this and also the photo quality. So cue a montage and then we're going to get into the real nitty gritty. And trust me, does the price outweigh the bad points on this lens? And there are a few, but there's also some good points. Anyway, cue montage. First impressions, really, a lens at this price point. The build quality here is metal. It's like really hard. The focus ring feels pretty good. The aperture ring, which is something that some of you might not be used to, is, well, it doesn't click, which is fine. It's nice and smooth. Bit of resistance there as well, but you've got an A button for automatic aperture, which means you can control it with the camera, or you can just dial it in from 16 right down to that smooth, creamy bokeh 1.8. But that does potentially bring some problems. And some of those problems with this Viltrox 24mm lens are, well, at this price point, you're going to expect something. It's not going to be perfect, but here's the thing. You're going to get vignetting at the sides at 1.8. You're also going to get some smearing and tearing and a lot of distortion in the corners. Now, if you're using photography, it's probably easier to get a lens correction like that and do it manually in Lightroom. So that's not a huge deal breaker. And video, you're not going to notice it that much depending on what type of stuff that you're shooting. But it's something to be aware of. However, it's not necessarily a fix, but it's not all bad, because once you come away from 1.8 and you start going into the kind of the 4s and the 5.6 all the way up to kind of f11, then you're going to get sharper images. You are going to get very little distortion. More importantly, you're going to lose all of that vignetting, which happens at 1.8. Now, what does that mean, especially if you're new to cameras? Well, it just means that 1.8 basically is the aperture is kind of open and as fast as it goes, which means very blurry background. So keep that in mind. The lower the aperture, 1.8, 1.4 and other lenses and even lower, then the blurrier the background. So you are still going to get that separation at the 4.5 and upwards, but it's going to be a lot less. But just keep that in mind. And again, 1.8, distortion, vignetting, is it going to be a huge deal breaker in video mode? Now, what could be a deal breaker is the fact that this Viltrox 24mm full frame lens does not have any stabilization. So right now, I've got active steady shot on the FX3. This is the Viltrox lens that I'm shooting on, by the way, and this is what it looks like. So when you're moving about, you can expect some little, well, look, you let me know in the comments how bad or not you thought the lack of stabilization is. So you're relying on the camera stabilization to do all this. Now, I'm on a beach, kinda, so it's not exactly the most stable thing, but shut up, bird. So now, out on a kind of a more flatter surface, camera's handheld, arm's length, and this is how it is. So if you're a vlogger on a full frame camera, which gives you an amazing look, then this is something to hugely keep in mind. So besides vloggers, which it does work if you take in the lack of stabilization, and depending on stabilization and the Sony camera that you've got, because of course this is a Viltrox 24 for E-Mount, who's it for? I've been using this lens in the last 3-4 videos that I've shot on the channel, and it's performed really, really well. Because of course it's 1.8, not only do you get the blurry background, but you also kind of get brighter shot, better low light, which is a good thing. Now, you can possibly spot the vignetting around here, and that's because I've turned off all of the camera compensation for it. So depending on the camera you have, it may compensate for the vignetting. And now that I've turned it back on, you can kind of see, has it made any difference whatsoever? I think for most people, unless you're really pixel peeping and really kind of nuts on the quality of your video, then it's probably not going to be a huge deal breaker. Now, this is a full frame lens, but what happens if you put a full frame lens on something like this? This is the Sony ZV-E10. So right now you're seeing this at 24 millimeters. It's on a full frame lens. So I'm going to swap these out, put these in the exact same position so you can see a before and after. So as you can see, it's not as wide because on APS-C cameras, it's not a full frame sensor. So that means there is a crop factor, and the crop factor that's on something like the Sony ZV-E10 is this, which means this lens is not a 24 mm, but it's actually this. Vic not doing any maths on, yeah, no. So as we're here, autofocus, hugely important, autofocus in any lens. How does it work? Jump back in. As you can see, it's tracking my face pretty well. The absolute downside of something like this though, if you're vlogging out and about with an APS-C camera, this is the camera at arm's length. So it's not a very wide shot. So again, should you buy a 24mm lens? Probably not if you're vlogging on an APS-C camera, unless this is the type of shot that you actually like. Overall, this lens is, man, why do people just look at this? Why do people leave this? Like this. Yeah, no, the lens isn't discarded rubbish for the price point. Yeah, it's not without its faults. Again, it's something that you have to weigh up, but I think is an entry-level full-frame lens for this kind of money versus what you'd pay for, you know, like a Sony G lens or even the G Master lens. This thing is like at least 2, 3, 4 times cheaper. And is there a trade-off? You know, yeah, I would be really happy if this was one of the first full frame lenses I ever bought. I would be super happy with this. Well built, autofocus works, 1.8, a little bit of problem. No stabilization on the lens, but if the camera's got decent stabilization, which it probably should, or if you're in Catalyst Browse, you can stabilize things anyway, then I think the trade-offs are, yeah, decent lens. Thanks, Viltrox. See you in the next video.